The governor and I had a chance to sit down and talk about the vaccination efforts, where things stand locally here in Olmsted County and statewide, and then his incentive program. We're also, though, in this half hour getting into the special session and taxes. And he says that there will not be any increase in taxes where our budget currently sits. We'll get into all of that in this half hour. Earlier today, though, when I did sit down and talk with him, we began with talking about the latest in vaccination efforts. Tell me about the vaccination efforts. We've got a lot more Minnesotans vaccinated this week than last week, but
we do.
Not as many as you would like.
Not as many as we'd like. We still are on pace to get this. Obviously, the president set a goal, and I think most of the medical professionals, that we need to get a minimum 70% of Americans vaccinated. That slows down the spread, the chance of a variant getting out, and of course hospitalizations and deaths would drop off. We're getting close to that. It's not equal everywhere. I'm here in Rochester and Olmsted County. This is one of the highest vaccinated places in the country. And I keep saying that's because folks here know what the vaccine is. They know what it does. You have a highly medical focused community, but you also have a lot of folks who are committed to their neighbors, and they're getting the vaccine, making sure they don't get sick. So we're out here offering some incentives, thanking Rochester Honkers, Northwoods Leagues. One of those incentives, Mall of America gift card, state fair, state parks, fishing permit, all of those types of things, just to get some of the folks who might be just not quite sure whether they should get it or not, give them a little extra incentive.
Okay, and then there are those who have heard everything, they've gotten all the information, they still don't want to get vaccinated because it's become political. We've talked about this before, and that disturbs you, or has to be hard.
It's hard, but the one thing is I will not shame people. I want folks to understand that there are reasons folks don't get it. I think the political is one that's the most unfortunate, but I do think that we should always believe we're going to try and move folks along here, get them good information, let them understand. This is the problem where we don't have trusted news sources, folks asking the hard questions and vetting the facts out. The fact of the matter is, and I said, don't listen to me, why don't you listen to the Mayo Clinic? They're the ones that would be able to tell you this, that the vaccine works. The chance of you getting sick from the vaccine is virtually nil. Hundreds of millions of people have taken it, and because of that, we're getting back to normal. So I just want to still encourage people to do this, encourage them to think about taking this. And when they do, it's the freedom and the protection that they get, but it's also you don't want to give it to somebody else. And we're so close.
And there's some people that absolutely can't because of whatever.
That's right.
And so when you lifted the mask mandate, people very concerned about that. The percentage is small for those who absolutely can't, but they're still out there.
No, it's a valid point. Folks who are immunocompromised or whatever, and I've heard folks, and there was nervousness. Obviously, CDC set their guidance. We follow the trusted advice. We were on a little different time schedule than them, but I think, giving it, most communities then could react as they would react. I think this kind of neighborliness of folks that are allowing businesses to make their own decisions, or folks that are more vulnerable, or you yourself to wear a mask if you are immunocompromised, it is one of the things that I think people forget about this, is that some folks can't take these, but when we have herd immunity, then the folks who aren't put at risk, who can't take the vaccine, that was measles, if you will, or smallpox, those types of things, and now COVID. So I would still encourage those folks. There's still time to do this. We're seeing, some counties are a little lower than others. We're trying to offer these incentives, but the numbers are still going up. We'll reach the 70%, but then I think this is long-term maintenance, much like other vaccines that we get on a yearly basis. We'll wait and see. We still haven't heard if there'll be boosters or when. More than likely, yes.
Conversation with Governor Walz continues here at Mayo Field in Rochester, where earlier today he was talking about the state's vaccination efforts and the incentive program, and offering free honkers tickets to anybody who isn't vaccinated who still needs a vaccination shot. Not only were we talking about the efficacy of the vaccination and where the rate stands statewide and locally, but then to talk about state politics, his emergency powers, and the budget. The peacetime emergency. The GOP put out a bill the other day saying that you would continue to have oversight. They say that they're making concessions so that you give up your executive powers. Where does that sit? It looks like an olive branch.
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily real, and 44 governors are doing this, and of course Both presidents did it. The fact is there's no more mitigations on. There's no more mitigations on businesses. There's no more things out there. What I'm doing is I have the ability to be able to procure some things if we need it, specifically vaccines. These vaccine events we do would go away. We couldn't be able to do those. We need the legislature to agree, and we're seeing how well that works.
But the piece of that bill that says that you would still have the authority to run the vaccination process throughout the state, you don't think that's real?
No, some of it, the legal sides of this, and the bill was written kind of hastily where it deals with HHS rather than MDH, and the federal assistance that we get. The federal money is a part of this. These are just operational things. It's become a pretty much of a talking point right now because these were folks who disagreed with wearing masks, disagreed with businesses or whatever. Every single day there's executive powers that are in the Constitution, and these are all granted by law that lets us allow run things. So they're, you know, if you will, the emergency, we have to declare that. So some of those things can be used. So I'm more than willing, like I keep asking them, one of the things in there is the eviction moratorium. I've asked them from January, just codify it. I'll sign whatever you bring me. Just codify it so there's an off-ramp of folks that don't get thrown out because of this. We get our landlords paid as we need to. We brought in the federal money and have a program that allows them, but they can't agree on how to do it. And that's one of the problems, that I would be counting on them to be able to agree in a short term. And I think it's really important that the changes they're talking about making not being thought through. They'd end up in court for a long period of time. But the next thing they would do is, what happens to the next governor long after I'm there if they don't have the ability to respond quickly like we were able to COVID? And that's what I worry about. So there's more thought to this. It's a talking point, if you will. But from the average Minnesotan today, basically what we're doing is accepting federal money because we're in an emergency situation, and I'm able to move some state employees around, use the National Guard, and be able to vaccinate people. That's about all there is.
Let's talk about the federal money for unemployment benefits.
Yeah.
Just spoke with an employer, runs an insurance agency, and she's been trying to hire people. So many businesses are saying this, and they can't because people are getting paid to stay home under unemployment.
Well, a lot of research shows that that's not certainly the only reason. What we're seeing now is that as wages started to go up, guess what? People started getting hired more. And so part of this is that there's been a long-term need to have wages raised. And I know if you're an employer, there's always striking the balance on your balance sheet about your expenditures versus what you're bringing in. This is a part of it. It will eventually expire here at the end, but I think there's quite a bit of good economic data to show that just because people are getting this, that's not the leading indicator of why people aren't being able to hire. There is a shortage of workers everywhere. There's a shortage of workers in states that aren't adding it. They didn't see a direct hiring from it. So I think you'll see a phasing out of that extra. The unemployment insurance system has been a wonderful way to keep talent in state at times when we see a downturn, and we will start to phase out of that. But I think the biggest thing you're seeing is a reorganization of the economy. A lot of folks aren't going to go back to jobs that they had before. They're going to have some different expectations. And I think for most folks, you know, and that's where it comes back to what are we doing with wages and all of that. We certainly don't want to disincentivize somebody from working, but we also want to say if someone's working, they should make a living wage where they're able to pay their bills and have housing. And I think you're seeing the economy maybe resettle a little bit on that, because places where they are hiring going up, it is being preceded by wage increases.
Is there any talk about making people prove that they have applied, therefore they can't get the unemployment benefits if they've applied for jobs and they just haven't gotten one?
I mean, there's a safeguard in there, and you try and make it. I would be naive to say that are there some people that take advantage of the system? Certainly there would be some. I think the bulk of folks that are simply couldn't go back to work, simply lost their job, simply didn't find where there's something there. But we're already seeing in the job numbers you saw came out today federally, and we'll take those. Pretty good uptake. I think 559,000. That will equate to jobs. We're currently 13th. In terms of unemployment of folks out of work. We're currently 4th in worker participation, meaning that there's only 3 states that have more people working that could be working than us, and there's 37 states that have higher unemployment than us. So we're still working our way back to the top. One of the things we're seeing in the country, and we're seeing it in northern Minnesota, a lot of those jobs were filled with people on visas, especially, you know, the hospitality industry and things. Those visas are not, no one's coming in. So a lot of it, especially in restaurants and, you know, some of the resorts up north, they hired a lot of their folks using visas for folks who had come in from the summer. A lot of Eastern European younger folks come in and then go back out. Those aren't there, so there just simply isn't enough workers, no matter what's happening.
As I continue my conversation with Governor Walz, we talked a little bit about his bid for re-election. Is he ready to announce that yet? We're also talking more about the politics at hand. As we know, the special session will start a little bit later this month, and where things currently stand. Can you address the special session that's coming up, the budget, and where things are at?
Minnesotans should expect a budget to be done. Our financial situations are solid. We had a good budget last time. We had projections of a deficit. That is not true. Our finances are in good shape. Our economy weathered the pandemic incredibly well. We have surpluses that can pay back the rainy day funds, and we simply need to compromise. I had proposals that I wanted to put in to go forward. I'm not going to get those. I recognize that. But what we need to do is to assure Minnesotans, compromise, do your work, move these things forward, and button this thing up. It shouldn't be that difficult. In fact, this should have been one of the easier ones. And again, there's a lot of policy decisions that should be made. I believe that there are some common sense reforms we can make around policing and public safety to make sure both people feel safe when they're stopped by police, but they also feel safe in their neighborhoods so they're not shot or carjacked. Those things are not mutually exclusive. We could find some compromises. It won't be everything, and then we should button this thing up and let Minnesotans get back to what they do in the summer, get back to their jobs. The economy's solid. We shouldn't provide any more uncertainty after this year, and there's just some posturing. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I've rejected all along these lines in the sand to say, well, if we don't get this, we're going to shut down government. That's not the way this should work. So I would say to Minnesotans, there's every reason to believe we get this thing done. We really have, should be done next week on the 14th. Things start to change, and it's irresponsible. After the 14th, we have to start thinking about vendors that we have to close down. We'll have to start closing down some of the construction projects to be ready by the 1st of July. And at that point in time, the 2017 court decision, we're going to have to decide what happens at our prisons, because we can't pay anybody. What happens at...
I just had an interview with prisons 2 days ago.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah, and they're having a hard time with recruiting and getting people.
Of course.
And they need more money. Has there been any movement with our prison system with that? Because there's a lot that has happened.
We put it out there. The budget's out there. It's a compromise. I've requested more. I requested more state patrol in some cases because our highways are seeing more, you move state patrol to do other jobs, and now all of a sudden you've got more highway deaths. And so it's trying to balance that out. We've put some of those things out there to be able to do that, some of those reforms that'll make a difference. That's what's being debated right now, and that's between the House and the Senate. They're supposed to come to a conclusion on, we set the overall parameters, so we have the money. We're not raising taxes. We have a rainy day fund, and as I said, our economy is now pretty soon will be top 10 states in the country. We just need to finish this.
Last point. Any chance you want to give your official bid for re-election yet? You've got Republicans throwing their hats in, not only Scott Jensen, but other ones.
I think they're all running. That's what I see. It's everyone. You should do a study on who's not running. What I've said to Minnesotans is that I wanted to get through, and so we get COVID in a manageable place. We're very close to that, and I wanted to get through this legislative session and get to the summer. So then I'll go out and listen to Minnesotans and hear what they have to say, because I always think it's pretty important. Everybody says, well, I'm going to run. Well, who's asking you to do that? And is that where we want to go? I think we've done a good job of bringing folks together. I think we've done it in a kind of a Minnesota way, not being mean-spirited. And I think when people start to look at the results of what happened with COVID and some of those things, that'll help inform me if we should do this again. And we'll see.